Hey, what's up, nerds? Paul at Radio Free Hammer Hall, and General's Handbook 2020 is here. And I want to talk about the thing that I'm most excited about in this book today, and that is the Anvil of Apotheosis, the new character creation system that we have in this book. It is in the narrative section, although there is suggestion to move it over to match play as well, and we'll talk about that later. Um, I think this is just a fantastic and fun thing to do. And again, as I'll talk about later, I think there's some pretty well balanced things about this. I think it's overall really, really well done. It's giving you tons of options, and you can really put together some heroes that are like, yeah, I wish I had that in my army. And what I think is really fun about these is a lot of them really lean towards being combat oriented heroes. There's not a lot of other stuff that you can really do besides like combat oriented enhancements. So personally, I love those kind of heroes. That's a thing that I just enjoy. And I still miss my Bretonian Lord on a Pegasus. I tried building something like him in Anvil of Apotheosis, and it did not quite work out, and I'll explain why. But in any case, let's go step by step through their steps in character creation. So, you build out your character through a system of destiny points. Before you start building your hero, you choose a number of destiny points to use when building that hero. Now, they set limits of either 20 or 40. To be frank, you can use whatever limitations you want. You can make a 10 destiny point hero that is functional and good, and you could make a 60 destiny point hero if you wanted to. It all depends on what you want to do and what kind of agreement you have with your opponent, or what system is set up in a tournament or event to be using these. But the basic idea is that you start with this pool of destiny points to use. Abbreviated as DP. I'm probably going to say DP a lot, just because it's a lot shorter than destiny points. So that is step one, deciding how big, basically, this hero is going to be. Step two, they call Ancestries. In most other common parlance, this would be picking the race of your character. So you can make a human, a dwarf, an elf, a dragon ogre, a grot, a skeleton. There's a ton. I think there's 23 different ancestries in here that you can choose from. And that sets, their base stats, like that wheel up in the upper left-hand corner of a war scroll. So it sets their base movement, their base save, base bravery, base wounds. And it also gives you your keywords. For some of them, you also choose keywords. For example, for both mortals and demons, you pick which god you're aligned to, which chaos god you're aligned to. So that is giving you a little bit of flexibility and a little bit better synergy with the army that you're creating. Just a suggestion that I would throw out there. I think it would be perfectly fair to also add other keywords that are not really impactful, but just make things synergize better with your army. Maybe make your army make a little more sense. An example I could give you is if I want to make a mortal Nurgle hero, I don't have an option in the book to make him a Rotbringer hero. However, if my opponent's cool with it, just add the Rotbringer keyword too. If you're Skaven, you get to pick your clan. Let's see. A couple of these come along with mandatory abilities. So Malignants are the Night Haunt, so they all have Ethereal and Fly. So your Ancestry for them costs way more than the other Ancestries. Most of the others are 4 or 5 Destiny points, and to be a Malignant starts at 12. So that is an interesting bit there. There's lots of options. Basically, you can make a hero from any army that you want. And since we're talking narrative here, again, I was talking about keywords before. We can create lots of narrative reasons to make our hero work in our army and have it be something unusual, right? Like, I can have an ogre in Cities of Sigmar if, you know, I come up with a good story reason that I have an ogre leading a Cities of Sigmar army. You know, things like that. So I think, you know, if you're going the step further into the narrative, definitely, I think, play around with keywords and say, yes, I'm going to have that ogre leading my human force. I'm going to, you know, have, you know, Iron Jaws leading Grots. You know, a Caradron Overlord leading Fire Slayers. I don't know. Various different things that we can pick. So there's a lot of flexibility there, and I think there's, you know, for the person that wants to go above and beyond and take this to like the next level, then you definitely can play around with this even more beyond just the suggested. I would call them suggested rules, honestly, for certain parts of this. Because I think, you know, if you, just to continue the example, if you wanted to make a free guild ogre, that's one, well, 2 keywords away, and those keywords don't matter much. It's just changing the base stats of the character that you're working with. So I think it's just fine. Our step 3 brings us to the armory. This is, I think, one of the more fiddly sections of the character creation. You are given 2 tables with a bunch of weapons, and you are basically given a set of options, right? You have table 1 is one-handed weapons, table 2 is two-handed weapons, and then you can also take a shield. So if you're picking from one-handed weapons, you can go just a one-handed weapon and a shield, 2 one-handed weapons. If you take a two-handed weapon, you can't take anything else. The exception to that is the bow. If you take a bow, then you can also take a one-handed weapon in addition to that, because the bow is a ranged attack only. The interesting caveat for that is that there's no restriction. It doesn't tell you like which one-handed attack that you can take when you're taking a bow. So you can take a fairly powerful one-handed weapon in addition to a bow, which is a pretty powerful ranged weapon. It has an 18-inch shot, 4s and 4s, 2 damage. And you can go bananas putting more buffs on that. So you have a variety in here of different types of weapons, and they all have little bits of different stats. Do they have 2 attacks? Do they have 3 attacks? Do they have 4 attacks? Are they hitting on 3s or 4s? Wounding on 3s or 4s? Do they have rend? Do they have multiple damage? Yeah, so you have a lot of options to work with. And my first recommendation really here is that your one-handed weapons are 1 DP, and your two-handed weapons are 2 DP, and a shield is 2 DP. So, when you are constructing your character, keep in mind that your base stats, your base weapon, is actually really cheap compared to the upgrades that we're going to get to in later steps. So I'm going to circle back to that later, but the big thing that I would want to emphasize is also don't necessarily get too hung up in the name. You can use a sword and make it a hammer if you want to. You're picking a stat line, and you can do whatever narrative thing with that you want. That bow doesn't have to be a bow. It can be a gun. It can be throwing a rock. It could be fire breathing. Whatever you want to call it. It's just sort of a generic name thrown onto something to have a point of reference. So, our character archetypes are step 4. You essentially either get a guy with a command ability, a priest with a prayer, or a wizard with a spell. This is one of the few points that I'm actually going to read out of the book so that you get an idea of what your different options are. So if you take a commander, that's someone with a command ability, you get to either take lead the attack or lead the defense. You get to pick one of those command abilities to be on your hero. Lead the attack gives 1 unit +1 to hit. And lead the defense gives a unit +1 to save. Those are both pretty strong, although given how hard it is to buff save rolls, being able to get +1 to save for 1 command point is really powerful. Like, that is a really good command ability. Over on our priest side, our prayers roll on a d6. They go off on a 3. You have one that does d3 mortal wounds to an enemy unit. The other gives you a 6-up ward save on a unit until your next hero phase. For wizards, you base cast 1 spell a turn. There's a lore of 4 different spells here that you choose from. And in addition, you still know Mystic Shield and Arcane Bolt. So real quick, running through these different spell options. The Aura of Protection goes off on a 7, gives a unit a 6-up ward save. Curse of Damnation goes off on a 7, and it does d3 mortal wounds and subtracts 1 from the save rolls for attacks that target that unit until your next hero phase. So it does d3 mortal wounds to them and then makes them -1 to save. That is, and it goes off on a 7. So that's better than Festus the Leech Lord's spell for the same casting value. That's a really good spell. Wildfire, you pick 1 unit, has a casting value of 6. You roll a die for each model within 12 inches of the caster. On a 5-up, it does a mortal wound. If you're targeting a single model, you roll 3 dice for that particular single model. And our last one is Raise Dead. Goes off on a 6. You pick one friendly unit within 12 inches of the caster, and you can return a number of slain models equal to up to D3 wounds. So you're just casting on a 6, bringing back dead models to a unit. For one wound models, you're just bringing back D3 models. That is, again, very strong. I think no matter which archetype you pick, you have very strong options to go with. And the interesting thing is that these don't cost any destiny points. These are just, you pick one. You can't be both. You can't be a commander and a wizard. You can't be a commander and an acolyte. I'm sure someone will come up with a destiny point value that lets you double up for other gameplay reasons, because naturally people are going to want to make a wizard that's also a champion, and currently the way the rules are built, you can't do that, and there's not really any guidance on how to do that if you wanted to. Up next, number 5 this is actually an optional step. This is your Bestial Companion. So if you don't want a mount or a Bestial Companion, you just can totally skip this section. There are 3 beast options. The first one is a minor beast. That is something that is not a mount. That is like Korgus Kull's Fleshhound that he has. It's something along those lines. So think, adding a Gryph-hound to a Stormcast Eternal hero. Something along those lines. Nurgle hero, add a bunch of Nurglings on the base. So a lot of the upgrades for your Bestial Companions can't be used on a minor beast. Our next one is a mounted beast. This is going to basically be like a thing that you ride on. The other thing that I did not mention is your minor beast adds 1 to your wounds characteristic. Mounted beast adds 2 to your wounds characteristic. And it's 6 DP and 8 DP respectively for those two. And the weapons profiles base for both of those are actually the same. And they're not very good to start. But remember, this is, something like a horse or something like that you're riding. This is not a monster. And if you want to pump up the numbers on this to something where the mount itself is more threatening, then you really need to invest some extra DP into your other upgrades for it, which we'll be talking about very soon. The other thing you get with a mounted beast is you change your movement characteristic to 8. So you're getting extra movement for free along with taking a mount. Our last one is the Gargantuan Beast. And this is essentially just a monstrous mount. This adds 8 to your wounds characteristic, and it changes your movement to star. So you have a damage table here. It starts at movement 10 and degrades to movement 2 on 12 plus wounds. And it's 15 DP to get that particular option, and you also gain the monster keyword when you do that. I will say that this one actually has outright strong attacks. If you take a gargantuan beast and buff it further, it is going to be a tank. It's going to be a really good monster. So real quick, I just want to go through the upgrade options for your bestial champions, or companions rather. So we have a table of things to upgrade them. For 4 DP, you can give it flying. For a gargantuan beast, you can give it a breath attack. For 1 DP, you can basically do D3 mortal wounds on a 2-up when they charge. Razor sharp claws, you can improve the rend characteristic of their claws by 1. So all of the attacks on these are either claws or maw, and the razor sharp claws is just to add more rend to the claws, and that costs you 2 DP to add 1 rend. And you have a cap of rend minus 3. You'll see that you have a hard cap on rend and saves in this book. So you're always capped at rend minus 3. You're always capped at a 3-up save. Theoretically, you could build something with more than that. That's why there's, special rules in place to do that. And for these different upgrade options, there's 2 different types. There's abilities, and there are characteristic enhancements. Abilities you only get to take once. They're just, like flying, for example, is an ability. You can't take double flying. Doesn't make any sense. But something like razor sharp claws adding 1 rend, well, you can take that up to 3 times. So any of your characteristic enhancements, you can take up to 3 iterations of that. So for 6 DP, I can give my regular mounted beast rend 3 on his claws. Poisonous Bite does a mortal wound on hits of 6. Gobble Attack, that is basically the Star Drake, like nom nom 1 unit, 1 model. It's almost exactly that attack. Terror reduces your opponent's bravery. Savage Frenzy adds 1 to the attacks characteristic of each row of the damage table, if there is a damage table, or to each attack. Well, I'm sorry. You have to pick either the claws or the maw. And that is only 1 DP, which is really interesting. And then you can also have Savage Ferocity or Savage Strength that add +1 to hit or +1 to wound. Those are also 1 DP. So upgrading your attacks, hits, wounds on your bestial champion is cheap compared to doing it on your hero itself. That's just something that I thought was important to note here, is that you get it for 1 DP, and that is dirt cheap compared to what it is on your hero. You can get a Stomp that does D3 mortal wounds after combat's over. And you can get a Lashing Tail that, let's see, if you roll a die for each enemy unit within 3 inches, if the roll is less than the number of models in that unit, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So a couple of different versions of ways to do D3 mortal wounds to enemy units nearby, and then various other upgrades. Excuse me. Promise I don't have COVID. So step 6 is now doing that same exercise that we just did on our Bestial Champion on our hero. So, and we have more options here. So once again, we can add flying, we can add to your saves, we can add to your movement. Personally, I think the addition to movement is pointed wrong. It's 2 DP for 1 inch of movement, which is really expensive, especially when things are not moving that fast here. You can add wounds. You can add, hit, wound, attack, damage. You can get a 6-up ward save. You can get ethereal. That's another one that I think is probably pointed wrong. It's only 3 DP to be ethereal. And it's real easy to get to a 3-up ethereal save with a ward save. It's real easy. We can get regenerate. That gives in each of your hero phases, you roll a die. On a 4-up, you heal D3. Interesting ones here. Battle Standard Bearer. It just gives you the totem keyword, which often doesn't really matter in a lot of armies, but it occasionally comes up. And then that gets combined with Inspiring. Inspiring, what it does is all friendly units within 12 inches of your hero use that hero's bravery instead of their own bravery. And if your hero is a totem, in other words, if you made him a battle standard bearer, then the range is extended to 18 inches. So that is basically the 8th edition, bravery or leadership bubble rule that you had with your general. So they kind of brought back that idea. And there's definitely some armies where you can play around with this and have an army that gets really resistant to battle shock. Your humans, dwarves, and elves are all bravery 7, and you can add additional bravery for 1 DP. So for the 3 DP for adding to bravery, because remember we're capped at 3, then we make it a totem, and then we make it inspiring. Now you're broadcasting a bubble, an 18-inch bubble of bravery 10 for all of your units to work off of. That is making a lot of things damn near immune to battle shock. Usually bravery buffs are not that exciting, but I think this particular one, if you're looking to make something that is going to give you battle shock resistance, because there's nothing in here that outright it makes units immune to battle shock. But that one gets close. That definitely helps. And then what we do also have in here is an ability for both the priest and for the wizard to get +1 to casting and prayer rolls respectively. It is 3 DP. That's also probably undercosted, because you can very easily make yourself a hero that's a wizard and is 10 DP total and is casting on a +1, and its keywords give you access to your army's spell lore. So that's really good. I think that might have been a little bit of a goof in there. One of the other things, just going back a moment, is that there's not a conditional thing on the command abilities that say you can't stack them. So I guess we're just going to sort of assume that for now until the FAQ comes out that we can't stack them, because nothing stacks in Age of Sigmar like that anymore. An interesting ability that we have, Consummate Commander, for 5 DP, that gives you an extra command point when you start the game. That's kind of cool. And that's going through most of these. We have like the double hits on 6, we have mortal wounds on 6. But you get the idea. That's going through the general iterations of what we can do. Like, this is basically all of the really generic abilities that we see frequently throughout various different armies. They're all kind of in here. We don't have anything really that's like, it's not like off the wall. It's not anything that's really specific to an army. It's all stuff that is very generic, but the combinations of things that you put together within all of those generic sorts of things can make a very unique hero that feels like it belongs in your army of choice. And it also just gives you the option to do lots of cool conversions. If you always wanted a demon hero on Rotfly, now you can make one. All of those little things that are missing. Everybody wants a hero on a demigryph. You can definitely build out a hero on a demigryph, no problem. So I think it gives you a lot of flexibility. What I will say is that your additions to hit, wound, attacks, hit, wound, damage, those are all 2 DP for a +1 to any of those. And when you're considering that your base stats on your weapons, your base hand weapon is 1 DP. And then to improve it, +1 to hit is 2 DP. So if you really want to go bananas and make a really powerful weapon for your hero to carry, it's going to be expensive. And I think for some people it may be more expensive than they really want it to be. And in my own balance testing, I've kind of started taking a random sample of heroes and kind of try and recreate that hero in the Anvil of Apotheosis and see where it comes out. Because their suggestion is to do 10 points per DP. And that actually seems about right. You end up getting really overcosted heroes when you do that, though, when you try to hit specific attack numbers, specific hit and wound numbers, and rend and damage. If you're trying for a specific number, it is going to get expensive. If you look and say, well, this is about the amount of damage output that I want, it's pretty balanced when you do it that way. You pick the right weapon or set of weapons, and that's going to give you what you want. Important to note that taking a shield is a purely aesthetic option. The best save you can get to is a 3+, as I've mentioned before, and you can take +1 to save 3 times in your character enhancements and abilities. So that means, and there's no ancestry that has no save. Everybody has at least a 6-up save, which means if you go +3 to a 6-up save, it brings you to a 3-up save, which means a shield is an aesthetic choice, because it's the same amount of DP for a shield that it is for extra armor. So again, that particular thing is a narrative choice that you make. Like, I want my guy to have a shield. Cool. What's he gonna do with that shield? It's how you want to model your hero, more so than making it like a rules thing. Overall, I really, really like this system. I think it's actually going to produce pretty balanced heroes. And if anything, using the 10-to-1 conversion rate, the worst thing that's really going to happen doing that is you're going to have underpowered heroes. You're going to have heroes that just cost too much because of the way you build your character out. Certain things are just expensive. If you want something that's really fast, it's really going to cost you. So, and you can't even really get to really fast because you can only take +3 movement, and being mounted on a monster takes you to it changes your movement to 10. So the best movement you can come up with is 13. So that's definitely not the fastest thing in the game. There's a bunch of little edits in here that I wish they would do, but I think this is a fantastic start. The other idea that I'm working with is integrating this into Path to Glory. And my sort of initial proposal for Path to Glory is basically have a rubric of, like, choose how many DP you want for your hero, and that determines how many followers you get. So I think it would work out pretty well if you went a 10 DP hero gets 5 followers, 20 DP hero gets 4 followers, and so on. And then cap it at 40, because anything over 40 is ridiculous. If you build a 40 DP character, it's really good. Those are very strong heroes. So I think it would be an awesome way to play Path to Glory. I think it's going to be an awesome addition to narrative tournaments, so that people are bringing in custom heroes, custom generals for their army, rather than just kind of something stock, or using some sort of homebrewed system to make a custom hero. I know some tournaments have done that, and there, it's been not perfect. I think this is a really good answer to doing that. I really like it a lot. I can't say that enough times. I'm ready to get out there. I've already been just like tooling around with, building heroes. What do I want to make? What do I want to build? There's just so many interesting options. So many different combinations of things that you can come up with. It's just a really fun thing to play around with, and one of the cool things about this too is that you can kind of bring back like some of those old special characters that, they've died in the lore and they've gone to legends, but you can kind of rebuild that character a little bit. Bring back something from the past, like my Lord on Pegasus, which is still in rest in peace territory, because I can only cap out at like movement 11, and I'm looking for movement 16, and then flying is another 4 DP, so just movement buffs, I'm already at 10 DP. Plus I have to take the beast, which I believe is 8 DP, and 4 for a human hero, so I'm already over 20, and I haven't even looked at weapons yet or actually making the mount a mount rather than just being 2 attacks at 5 up, 5 up. But if I wanted to build out the Bretonnian Lord on Pegasus as close as I could in Anvil of Apotheosis, I'm looking at probably like a 30 DP hero. And converting that to 300 points, that's like bananas overcosted. Like, that just doesn't work. The Bretonnian Lord is half that. that was the key for so long, is that it was a 140 point hero that hit like a truck. But anyway, I digress. I'm really excited about Anvil of Apotheosis. I hope all of you are too. Leave your ideas for heroes down in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always, and I'll talk to you all later.